Today I'm joined by Laura Watson. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
It's my pleasure. Could you tell people a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. Well, I'm joining you today from central Alberta, Canada, about halfway between Calgary and Edmonton. And a little snowy here. Drove home through a whiteout last night. So definitely glad to be here with you today. During the day, I spend my time working with small business owners and executive leaders, working on their business and leadership development, helping them be the best versions of themselves and take their life, businesses, and leadership to the next level. And when I'm not in the boardroom doing that, I'm actually in the ballroom because I'm also a competitive ballroom and country dancer and just came back from Worlds in Orlando, Florida over the holidays. So I have lots of fun doing amazing things every day.
Wow, that's quite interesting, actually. How did you get into ballroom dancing?
Well, dancing, it came late in life for me. It's something I watched my parents do a little bit, at weddings, stuff like that when they were younger, or I was younger, and thought, oh, that's something I would just love to be able to do that. But I did not grow up with dancing. Um, all my partners had no interest in dancing. My husband has no interest in dancing, and I got into my 40s and I just realized, if I'm going to do this, it's time to do this. So I took a few group classes, liked it, hired a coach to do some one on one work with, found out that I really liked it, and decided that I would get into competition as a reason to get better. I learned enough that I could do some social stuff, but if I really wanted to get better, then competition was the way to go. So I've been doing that probably for about 13, 14 years now. And ballroom's been amazing. And then a friend of mine asked me to join him in the country dancing, and there's some crossover there. So that's what we did. And I actually became a world champion a couple of years ago. So it's pretty cool. I love it. And it just gives me a great balance in my life between, work and having a hobby that keeps me physically fit and has introduced me to some amazing people. And I have a whole dance family that I just love.
I love that. A lot of time for that. Do you travel a lot with that, Laura?
I get to travel a bit, yeah. Worlds requires us to qualify. So, and we have to do at least two, if not more events. So, fortunately, we have a qualifying event here in Alberta that I do every year. But then I have to travel for my other qualifiers. So, I'm mostly in the US for now. Great cities: Nashville, Orlando, Dallas, Phoenix, Arizona. So, yeah, there's tons of opportunities in the US, and that's primarily where I travel. So, I get to do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool, to be fair. How do you kind of balance that with your work and stuff? Is it take up a lot of time, or is it not too bad?
Well, fortunately, that can be evening and weekends that the dance stuff happens. So, and I've always, built my business. I've been coaching small business owners for about 20 years now. And I was doing the Zoom thing long before it was a thing. And but I've also raised two children, and my husband has his own business. So my kids are now young adults; they're in their 20s. But it was always very important to me that I be a present parent as well. So I built a lifestyle business for myself where I could be working with my clients basically 9 to 5 kind of thing, and then have my evenings free to be with my kids, pursue my interests as well. So it's been a really nice, balance over the years.
I love that, and I'm a big fan of that kind of business and making it fit your life as well. I think that's so important. I think, you know, a lot of people think you get into business to make lots of money. Well, actually, sometimes it's just about having a better lifestyle and being happier, and you can do that with your own business as long as it's done correctly.
Well, absolutely. So many small business owners, their business is another baby. And I totally get that. And they want to put their all into it. The challenge becomes often these owners are subject matter experts. They are at least my clients anyways, they're engineers, they're accountants, architects, they know their stuff. But now they're running a business, they're leading a small team, which takes a completely different skill set. And so, what often takes so much time from their life is learning all those additional skills and kind of tripping um, their way through it. And so, what I do with people is help them do the right things in the right order, become more effective, more efficient, so that they can get their life back and can have that balance they're seeking. Because that's why they started their business in the first place, is to create a better lifestyle for themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's overlooked a lot of the time when people get into business because they think if I'm really good at something, like I have a particular skill or I can make a particular product or really good at delivering a particular service, then I'll just start my own business. But then they often fail to see all the extra work that goes into running the business and the accounts and all the administrative tasks and everything else, and the challenges of finding your own work as well, which can be more difficult. Because obviously, if you're working for somebody, the work is just presented to you, and you can just concentrate and focus on that. But
Well,
you
and
know,
that was a big shift that I had to make because before coaching, my background is actually in counseling. So I have a master's in social work. I was working in the nonprofit sector, and my clients were given to me. So to break off and go into coaching, I mean, I didn't go cold turkey. I had a transition period. I still, worked in the counseling profession. I was in a nonprofit organization while I transitioned into my coaching business. But it was completely different. I had to find my own clients, as you were talking about. I had to learn how to sell. And I had to, the most important thing in that regard is I had to deal with my limiting beliefs and my head game in regards to selling, because I had some real roadblocks around selling was slimy and I had to convince people. And unfortunately, my coach training just said, well, give free sessions to everybody and they'll automatically see the value and they'll automatically sign up. And that didn't happen. So I struggled for almost 5 years to figure out how to actually enroll my own clients. And so, huge learning curve for me, which fortunately I mastered and has been one of the things that I've been able to coach my clients in and help them improve, is their ability to enroll clients and have those conversations as well and deal with that mindset.
yeah, I've got that same aversion, I think, and I don't know where it comes from actually, but where we just think selling is dirty, it's wrong, it's
Hmm.
but when it's done well, you don't feel that. You don't feel like you've been, sold to essentially. You just feel like somebody's kind of walked you through the process of getting something you already want.
Well, exactly. What I had to learn is that selling is not pushing, it's not convincing, that selling is actually a helping conversation. You're right. People are looking for something, they're looking for help with something. Now, unfortunately, sometimes they go looking for help and they get sold a product or a service that maybe they don't necessarily need. And so they can run into some problems there. So I actually learned a method called spin selling. It comes from a book by Neil Rackham, and he studied selling and the best sales techniques for over 10 years. And then he distilled what he learned down into this acronym SPIN, SPIN. And it really is just a way of uh, leading a conversation where we are showing up in a way where we're wanting to understand the person we're having a conversation with. What's going on in their world? What are they dealing with? What are their challenges? What are they up against? What are they trying to create for themselves? What are the implications if they don't solve these problems? And then are we in a position to show up and be able to help and with those issues? And if we are, then we're solving problems, we're helping, and then a sale can take place. So that's what I had to learn, is that sales conversation is really a helping conversation. And that made a world of difference for me.
Yeah, and I think that kind of can change your mindset, the way you look at things as well. Because if you think of it that way, the more conversations you have, the better as well, right? Because you're actually
Mhm.
learning about people, what people actually want, what they need, what they're struggling with. And even if you're not getting the sale, you're actually getting an idea of what the issues are and how you could potentially help people in the future.
Exactly. And sometimes not every prospect is going to be a fit. And fit is super important. So there's been conversations I've had where I've learned, you know what, I'm not the best person for you. I'm not going to try to convince you that I am otherwise. So I will direct that, excuse me, I will direct that person to other resources, refer them on elsewhere where they can get their needs met. Because I also believe in the idea of karma, and just putting some goodwill out there into the world. And so if I can't help directly, there's probably somebody else who can, and I really want to point the person in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think people will respect that and remember that as well. Like you say, and you describe it as karma, but I think that kind of goodwill that you're building up, that you're actually genuinely trying to help somebody. And I
Hmm.
think that that can only build your brand and your business, and have people talking about it in a positive light, which then surely, in the long run at least, will benefit you.
Absolutely. And yes, I've had people where I haven't been able to help immediately. They've, pursued a resource that I suggested to them. And then they come back later and say, hey, you really helped me with such and such, or you pointed me in the right direction. And now I know somebody else I think who could use your help. And they've maybe referred someone to me. So, yeah, so I think that that's, super important, is really business is about helping people solve problems. And when we can help them do that, then we're going to be okay.
Absolutely. And I think that's what is important for business owners, to get into that mindset, rather than the selfish mindset of thinking they're trying to make money, is thinking about how can I actually help people. And then the money it kind of comes along as a I don't know how to word it, but
Well, the
as the
money comes
fallout of
along
what you're
at,
doing, really.
well, exactly. It's a benefit of showing up and doing the right thing. Um, that's really what attracted me to coaching, actually. I mean, obviously, coming out of social work, I'm all about helping people in one way or another. Um, and what attracted me to coaching actually was I met my husband's first business coach, because I grew up in a household that my dad was a school teacher and an administrator, and he had some pretty negative beliefs about business. I heard stories that business is bad, and business owners are just out to take advantage of you, and so that's kind of what was running in my mind. So then when I met my husband's business coach, he was coaching owners from a perspective called higher purpose, higher profit, which is very much aligned with what Simon Sinek talks about now. The idea of having a why to your business, the idea of making a contribution to the world, making a difference in the world, and that the profit comes from making a difference in the world. And that's what really appealed to me, and really what made helped me make my decision to move into coaching, is really about helping people be the best they can be, helping them make a difference with their business, and that the profit comes with that.
Absolutely, and I completely buy into that. Um, but I also understand your father's kind of fears around business and stuff, and I understand it because I've kind of had that myself a little bit, where
Mm,
I think we impacted more by negative stuff than we are by positive stuff, aren't we? So then and that's an evolutionary thing, right? Because the negative stuff could lead to your death, so it's a survival thing. So
yes. Mhm.
you hold them at a higher esteem, and worry about them. So if we have a few bad experiences, it can really undo lots of the good experiences. And when you think about businesses and stuff that products you might buy or services you might use, the good stuff kind of goes unnoticed a bit, because it's good. You have no complaints about it,
Mhm.
and it's done what you wanted it to do, and things keep going on, and you just get on with your life, and you don't really dwell on it. But the negative stuff, because it's had a negative impact, maybe it's cost you money and you've got nothing out of it, or the product you got is broken, or you've had bad service, then that stays with you, right? So then you
Mhm.
build up over time, you build up this negative picture, and actually
Yes.
those were probably the minority of of interactions with businesses when you
Yes.
really look at it objectively.
Yeah, I use the expression the negative sticks like Velcro and the positives wash off the Teflon. And yeah, you're right. Unfortunately, it's just how it's part of our brain wiring, and it is attached to our amygdala and our survival instincts. And there's a whole conversation that could be had around that. So it's super important, actually, when we know that that dynamic exists. The theory tells us that we have to notice 5 positives for every one negative because this dynamic exists. And so it's kind of just by noticing the negatives, we're kind of on autopilot and we're not building our awareness. So if we want to change that dynamic for ourselves, we have to do it on purpose, because otherwise it's not going to happen by accident. And so, really noticing what does work and what the positive experiences have been can have a huge impact, and literally rewire our brain. So, super important that we be mindful of that.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I've spoke about this on the podcast before, but I stopped watching the news in 2016 for that
Mm.
very reason. Because the news, if you watch it, there's so much negative on there. I think the majority is negative. They might have like one good news piece in the whole show, tops, but you're getting so much negativity pushed into you, that you're absorbing, and it's from, a trusted source, I suppose, because it's on TV and whatever else. And it was making me depressed.
Hmm.
So I had to stop watching it. And when I stopped watching it, my life turned around almost instantly because I wasn't having that constant feed of negativity being pushed into my brain and having to kind of process and overcome that.
Well, exactly. And all that negativity just serves to reinforce our negativity bias. We already have that bias there. So I'm with you about the news. It's there to attract attention. The news outlets obviously want you to watch, and what people get, they tend to watch the train wreck, versus something positive going on. So we have to be very careful. We have to take care of what we feed our brain and our mind, just like we're careful about what we feed our bodies. I remember a number of years ago, actually, the Calgary Herald, our local newspaper, they made a shift where they had a section of the paper called the good news. And the paper was pretty thick. And the good news section was 1 page of the whole newspaper. And unfortunately, the good news section didn't last for very long. They ended up removing it and going back to their usual model. So unfortunately, I mean, we're predispositioned, we're pre-wired to be more sensitive and actually look for those threats and the bad news. So knowing that, we have to be super careful about what we feed our brain.
Yeah. And like I say, you can't blame the newspapers and the news really, because this, unfortunately, it's what sells, right? So it's what people obviously are drawn to consuming. But
Yes.
it's, I'd rather some positive stuff, to be
Yes,
honest. And like you say,
absolutely.
but when it comes to the balance, um, and I'm not sure where I've seen it before, but you mentioned it earlier, that 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interactions. But I've seen that somewhere before myself. That I think it's from a study or something, isn't it?
Hmm.
But you know, I look around in life in general, in workplaces, and we're not getting that. You have to
We're
actively search for that.
absolutely. And so, as a leader, when I'm coaching leaders, and a leader can be a parent, a leader can be a manager in an so um, actually that 5-to-1 ratio is something that I learned when I became a certified communication expert around a model called parent effectiveness training. And that was something that we learned in reinforcing to our children that, excuse me, if we want to really build our children up, we need to give them 5 positives for every one constructive piece of feedback. And so the same for managers in the workplace. If they really want to build their team members and get the best out of their team, one of the things that they can do is notice what's working, what's going well, and give positive feedback to their direct reports, at a ratio of like 5 to 1 for the constructive criticism or feedback.
Yeah, I'm all for that. And it definitely is not a widespread thing that from my experience. Obviously, that's not from any extensive research or anything. That's just from my own personal experience, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And it's disappointing for me because we have the data there to support that that is, the best way forward to develop people, and we're still
Mhm.
not doing it, which is kind of frustrating.
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, but you were also just again predispositioned to be looking for the problems, and especially in business or in any area of life, there's always another problem to solve. And I get that. I'm not suggesting that life is going to be all rainbows and roses, and that's all we can ever focus on. Absolutely, there's going to be challenges to overcome, and the challenges and overcoming those challenges is actually where we grow. But noticing what is working well, noticing what works. Those are the things and the skills that we can bring to overcoming the challenges. Um, Otherwise, we dismiss uh, our strengths and our abilities and can beat ourselves up. So, super, super important. And yes, I agree with you. Unfortunately, not being done enough.
Yeah, I think it's because there's something that kind of falls into that grey area, doesn't it, where they can't, there's no metric for it at, at most workplaces. That's the problem, I think. Whereas, they got the statistics of, oh, our sales are down this week. Well,
Hmm.
you need to work harder rather than, they kind of focus on that more because it's easier and it's kind of you can measure it and you can say, oh yeah, we've done better this week, we've done worse this week. But
Yes.
I don't think it's not necessarily that black and white.
Well, yeah. And um, there's a model out there, a very dominant model, and I think we can probably trace it back all the way to our school days, because right, you're back in school, you get your test back, and you're focused on all the red marks that are on that test, and where did you make the mistakes versus where did you succeed. And there's a very interesting book out there that I read a while back. It's called Strengths Finder, and what it talks about is the idea of capitalize on your strengths. We can't be good at everything, which is why we have teams. People on a team all bring different strengths to the table. So let's figure out where your strengths are. And instead of pushing hard and struggling to try to fix what we think is wrong with us, capitalize on your strengths. And if you're a leader, build a team of people who bring various strengths to the table and can cover off all of the bases. We're going to do much better building on our strengths than trying to fix what we think is wrong.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's well. I don't think this happens enough where people use people for their strengths. So you come into a job role, say like a general job role, like a generalist, where you have to kind of do a bit of everything. But you might have somebody who's really good at one part of the admin process, and one person who's really good at I don't know, the hands-on side of it. But they're both expected to do both, rather than and they probably, from my experience, if you're really good at something, you probably enjoy it more as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if they enjoy doing one aspect of it more and the other person enjoys doing the other aspect of it more, why not allow them to do more of it to improve how the outputs go in? It'll improve their happiness, they'll feel like they're contributing more. But that
Absolutely.
still doesn't happen and people still get pushed. No, you have to do everything. Like, it doesn't make
Unfortunately,
any
yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah, well, you're right. It doesn't. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes because some small companies, at least, are a little cash strapped, and because the owner themselves has got themselves into a mindset of I have to do it all myself. Because they've developed the skills over the years. They've started this small company. They might be in a scarcity mindset, even though they don't realize it, and they're feeling like, oh, I just have to do it all myself. And that's a really dangerous mindset to be into because they can't do it all themselves. And so they may have to outsource something, even if just on a part time basis. Because if we just keep trying push against this wall of fixing what we think is wrong with us or what we can't do, that's where we slow ourselves down and trip ourselves up. So it can be challenging, absolutely, to seek help um, and hire out. We think we can't afford it. I did the same thing in my early years. Bookkeeping, not my thing. And but and I don't have a huge amount of bookkeeping to do in a coaching business, but there is some, and I struggled to try to keep my books up to date, and I didn't like it, didn't want to do it, only did it every quarter when my taxes were due. And finally, it's like, enough. I hired someone on a part-time basis, and she does a way better job. She actually loves it, which is like, good, thank goodness, because I don't. And she's good at it. And it made a world of difference. Then I was able to put my energies where I can be most effective and actually more profitable. And she gets done the stuff that is a nightmare for me. So, absolutely worth the investment.
Yeah, I think with small business owners, from my experience as well, they just want to control everything as well because it's their baby, isn't it? So that relinquishing that control and allowing somebody else to kind of have the reins with something seems to be a real difficult transition. Do you find that with your clients?
Oh, absolutely. I've got a client. We are right in the middle of that right now. Fortunately, he is starting to let go. He is brilliant. He's an engineer. He's brilliant at what he does. Um, but but he's not focused. And so he was ignoring emails and not getting to proposals on time. And where his strength is he understands engineering. He's a great mentor to his team. There were so many other pieces that were holding the business back. So he hired a woman originally for sales and marketing. And over the past year, I just met with her yesterday. Over the past year, her position is actually completely transformed, because in the conversations I've had with him and I've had with her, he finally has given over all the things. It started with email. He was just so scared to give over his email, but he wasn't responding. And his clients were getting upset and angry, and he was losing clients because he wasn't responsive. So the first thing, he actually went on holidays. And while he was on holidays, he handed over his email. And so the assistant that he had hired started responding to all the email in a timely manner, responding to customers and clients, and which made the customers and clients happy, and was his first taste of realizing he could hand something over and it would be okay. So that has grown over the past 6 months to now his assistant is sort of overwhelmed, and I'm working with her to manage that because he's handed over a lot. But that's exactly what he needed to do. And because he's done it now, um, the business is working better. The clients are happier. He now has the time to do the mentoring that he wants to do with his team. And, we're getting there. It's a process, but we're only, 6 months in, and transformation has already begun.
Yeah, none of this stuff happens overnight, right? It takes time,
Mm-hmm.
and especially if you've done things a certain way for a long time, it can take you a while to have the confidence in that new process and the new way of doing things. Especially, we all do things slightly differently. So
Mm-hmm.
when you hand it over to somebody else, they'll have their own kind of view and their own way of doing it, which could was probably effective, but not the way you do it, which kind of puts you on edge potentially.
Yes, it's often not, they're not doing it the way I would do it. And it's like, well, it doesn't have to be done. What's more important, your method or the result? Right. And so we have to remember it's the result that's most important. And, in this client's case, he had some trust issues to get over. We started working together right after his business partnership had broken down, and a business partner left the business. And it was not expected, and it's caught my client off guard, and uh, and he really trusted his partner. So there was some betrayal that he had to work through, And so that really held him back from being able to trust even the new assistant that he had hired to do exactly these things. So there were a lot of things that we had to work through that weren't, aren't necessarily traditional business things. You don't think about trust as something that you'd have to have a conversation about and work through. But sometimes those are exactly the types of business matters that need to be addressed in order to get the leader shifted and keep the business moving forward.
Yeah, I think we overlook it a little bit, and we separate and think, oh, business is business, and then your personal life and being human is
Mm,
separate. But actually, we're all humans interacting with other humans, and within this business context, it's layered, right? It's really complex because
it is all
everybody has,
intertwined.
yeah, and everybody has all these things that affect them personally. And, as much as we try to leave that stuff behind, we can't leave it behind completely. And it will affect our decision making and how we operate within a business as well, right?
Absolutely. And I'm, feel really fortunate because that's where some of my counseling background comes in handy. So, yeah, I talk to my clients about there are two sides to the business building coin. There's that business side and there's the personal side. It's entirely intertwined. And so, yes, I can talk business plans and execution with my clients, but I also have parenting conversations. I have addictions conversations. I've even had infidelity conversations with my clients because we're all one human being coming to the table trying to build a company or lead a team or just be effective in our management role. So it's all fair game. It all needs to be kind of looked at and addressed in order to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as long as we are kind of growing, or trying to develop in that way, I think, it'll only help the business side of
Hmm.
things anyway. Because if we kind of neglect that way, or neglect our personal stuff, and our personal growth, then eventually that's going to have a negative impact. Is my opinion.
Absolutely. And actually, that ties into um, a model that I've developed and a book that actually I've started writing. And it's all, and the idea is that, what I've seen over the years is that there's what I call operating systems at play. We have a personal, and it all begins with our personal operating system. And our personal operating system is our mindset, it's our communication skills, it's our time management skills, and how our health, our wellness. So we have to have, and it's kind of the base layer. Our personal operating system has to be in good shape before we start to layer on these other elements, because then there's a business operating system. There's all the infrastructure and things that are involved in building a business. And then we could take it to another level that I call the executive operating system, where we don't only have to be effective as an executive and effective in the business, but as an executive, you're also grooming the next generation of leaders. So I find that, there's all, I call them operating systems that are at play. There are different skills that are relevant for each of those operating systems. And it's a ongoing process of, first of all, knowing what the skills are and then learning how to practice those skills so that we can be most effective. And it really begins with us personally.
Yeah. Do you help people kind of, so obviously one of the things we talked about earlier is kind of the Simon Sinek approach and understanding your why. Do you help
Mhm.
people kind of figure that out? Because what I find is a lot of people don't have that figured out. They don't have that kind of bigger purpose, and without that, you kind of float around a little bit, not 100% sure of your values and what to put first, and then things
Mhm.
get misprioritized, and it can cause problems. Is that something you help people with?
Absolutely. So I love tools. There are tons of tools out there. And so over the years, I've built quite an extensive toolkit because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to bring the best tools to the table for what my clients need. So things like Start With Why, which was Simon Sinek's first book. And then he has a companion book called Find Your Why. And so I use that with my clients to help them find their why. I help them. Part of a business planning process is identifying your core values of your business. So I walk people through a core values exercise because that really is the foundation of their business. What are their core values? What is the purpose and mission of their business? Why are they doing this? What gets them up out of bed in the morning? Um, and then, once we've got those foundational elements, what makes their business unique? What is there are three uniques that are talked about in a book called Traction. And because every business has something different and unique and a reason why you should choose them over their competition. So the owner really needs to have clarity about that. And then we can get into the goal setting for the future and for the coming year, and then breaking that down into action steps and execution and what have you. So yes, the big picture stuff, the foundational stuff, as well as the what are we doing on an everyday basis stuff, is all areas that I work on with my clients.
Yeah, I like that. And like you say, that with the tools and stuff, it's important to figure out if there are good tools out there to use them, because people think they have to kind of reinvent the wheel all the time. But I didn't invent toilet paper, but I'm smart enough to use it. So
Exactly.
that's the thing, isn't it? You find the tools that are effective and that work, and you should be utilizing them. There's no reason to try and create something completely different. Or
Well, exactly. And I think but putting the tools into practice can be really challenging because our days are so busy. And so, first, finding them. And then I find that maybe we go to a workshop or we go to a retreat or we read a book and say, oh, those are some really cool ideas. Yeah, I want to do that. And then we get back to the office and the phone starts ringing, the emails start going, the complaints start happening, and we don't put those tools into practice. So that's one of the things that I get to do is first of all, bring the tools to the table, work through them, and then be the accountability agent to actually get them into practice, because it's in practice where the power of the tool is realized.
yeah, and it's in that consistency of practice, right? Because I've done the same thing where I've kind of found things I really liked. Oh, I'm going to do that, but then you kind of wane and you don't stick to it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's finding that ways, and like you say, having a coach or somebody to keep you accountable always helps. But it's finding ways as well, and discussing it with people to figure out ways to implement it into what you do day to day, really. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than just going full blast throwing something new in, maybe it's kind of a stepped process to get there.
Yes, absolutely. I often tell my clients, I'm here to make their life less stressful, not more stressful. And the idea of incorporating a new tool or do something different can feel stressful because there's already so much going on. So, yes, sometimes it has to happen in small, consistent steps. But just like working out and building a muscle, small steps that consistently followed are going to make the difference versus a concerted amount of effort for a brief period of time and then it falling by the wayside.
Absolutely. So yeah, progressive overload they call it with weight training and lifting, and that's kind of a good way to explain it. Really, is that you gradually pushing yourself, out of your comfort zone, maybe a little, but just enough that you can
Hmm.
kind of adapt to it before you then do it again, and then adapt to it before you then do it again, rather than going all in, doing way too much, and then going, this doesn't work for me, and completely abandoning the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah, it has to happen in a stepwise fashion. Yeah, as you know, like the weight training is a great example. You're not, if you can lift 100 pounds one day, you're not going to show up at the gym next day and suddenly lift 200. You've got to grow into it gradually. And sometimes that's another thing I find with goals and objectives. Sometimes we set the bar a little too high and we get a little too ambitious, and then it just kind of freaks us out. So I always want to have my clients stretching a little bit, and and I'd rather have them create a goal, achieve it, and then we reset the goal sooner rather than creating a goal that totally freaks them out and then they're going to abandon it anyways.
Yeah, and I suppose by doing that as well, and kind of figuring out your limits and and how you're going forward as well, you kind of build that emotional intelligence a little bit as well, where you're kind of aware of, when when it's a bit too much for you, or and making those minor adjustments really. And I suppose we can be bad at doing that on our own, but I suppose when you've got somebody else as well, where you can have them conversations and can kind of make you think in a different way potentially, or kind of question, why that is,
Hmm.
then we can probably adjust and keep it on a path that's an overall upward trajectory really.
Yeah, well, and the interesting thing is the compound effect that little bits of consistent change make. If you think about making, if a 1% change in a day, that's a pretty small piece, but it's still 1%. And now, the next day you're in a new place. Well, 1% change that day, the second day, and another 1% change, and another 1% change. There's a compound effect that happens that over a year, that's 356% change over the course of a year by just doing 1% per day. So it grows on itself, kind of like compound interest. I think we have to remember that and keep that in mind. We get in this mindset, oh, I got to do a big change in order for it to matter, and we don't have to do it that way.
Yeah, I think it's a patience thing, because I've had that
Mm.
previously, where you just want everything to be better instantly, don't you? Rather
Now.
than, I think we seriously overestimate what we can do in the short term and underestimate what we can do in the long term, and we just want it all now. And when it doesn't work, maybe it's partly to do with the kind of culture that we now live in, the instant gratification kind of culture, where even if we order something online, it comes the next day. is
Hmm.
is is that kind of instant gratification that we expect now, and if we don't get that, we think it's not working. We don't.
Well, exactly. And I think you're exactly right. We do live in an instant everything world now. And what happens, with whether it's our cell phone pinging with notifications, yes, I can order Amazon and have something the next day. And the interesting thing about instant gratification is it actually triggers dopamine. So whenever that happens, we get this little hit, and that's why it's hard sometimes to invest ourselves in something for the long term, because we don't get those hits of dopamine the same way that we do when the notification pings on our phone. And so it's not feeding our addiction, if you will, for that instant everything stuff. So that it is a challenge. And first of all, we have to know that that dynamic is at play, and then yes, be patient with ourselves, be because that's exactly what's needed.
Yeah. Do you find people are like that you work with, that kind of want everything now?
Yeah.
how,
And
how do you manage that?
I'm guilty of it myself too, right? Like the dance thing has been it's been a slow progression, and but it has been consistent, and I've reaped some benefits, and definitely enjoyed some success from it, but it's been slow and gradual. And so yes, though I still I want something now as well. I have a hard time being patient, and so do my clients. And we have to have the conversation and just be and remember that we're in this for the long haul, not the short haul. And little steps every day in consistently in the right direction will get us where we want to go. And it's
Yeah.
actually one of the reasons why in my sessions, I typically meet with my clients on a weekly basis. And every time I meet with them, back to that positive reinforcement thing we were talking about earlier, I have them report in on their wins. Obviously, I mean, we come to a coaching session to deal with a challenge or whatever, but I always start off with, what are the wins this week? What have you accomplished? Because I want my clients acknowledging themselves for the progress that they are making. Because when we acknowledge our progress, then that helps us stay patient and help us realize, okay, yes, I am moving forward, I am getting where I want to go. And that can help us be patient to deal with the next issue that we have on our table.
Yeah, that's important. I'm not good at that. I'm always my worst enemy. You know, I'm never progressing quick enough or getting to where I want to be quick enough,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
there's
I
a
don't
little
take the
thing.
time to kind of appreciate how far I've come or the wins on a day to day.
It's
But
important. So we can
mm,
keep a wins journal if we want. Another exercise that I was reminded of recently, so I've started it, restarted it myself, is a wins jar. So I put a little jar on my desk here. And when I have a win, I write it down on a piece of paper and I fold it up and I put it in my jar. And I can see the jar filling. And at the end of the year, I'm going to empty my jar. Maybe it'll be a bucket by the end of the year, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to review all of those wins. And so just seeing the jar right now filling up is a visual reminder that I'm creating wins for myself on a daily, weekly basis. And so that can be another, great little exercise.
yeah, I like that. I might buy myself a beer for every win, and then I'll do that.
Oh, I like that
I'll have
one.
a little. I can drink and celebrate at the same time.
There you go. Make it fun, right? I am all over the idea of fun. So whatever is fun for you, absolutely do that.
Yeah, and we do need to find stuff and ways to make that work because we are. Well, I say we. I'm speaking for people in general here, but I mean a lot of people I know are bad for accepting those wins and appreciating what actually we have achieved, and we all
Mm,
focus on the negative and what we haven't done or what we could have done or all that stuff.
mm. Oh yes, we should all over ourselves a lot. So yeah, acknowledging our wins. That 5-to-1 ratio that we talked about earlier. We can give that gift to ourselves. In addition to acknowledging others for what they're doing well, why don't we do that for ourselves?
Yeah, I've always been bad at it, but I acknowledge I'm bad at it. So as- the way I look at it as well is as long as um, I'm not putting myself into a negative spin where things are going badly,
Mhm.
then I give myself a little bit of leeway to kind of work on that. And I know I still got a lot of work to do on it, but I give myself a little bit of leeway because actually a little bit of drive saying I'm not done enough keeps pushing me forward as well a little. So I
Yeah.
want to keep the balance, but yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I invite you to consider that you might have been bad at this in the past. Doesn't mean you have to be bad at this in the future, because in every moment of every day, we have an opportunity to do something different.
Absolutely, and it's the choices that we make every day, right? Has that compound effect.
Hmm. Sure
So
does.
yeah, that's what I'm kind of working towards anyway. I'm trying.
We are all a work in progress.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Laura, what kind of other things do you do with your clients at the minute? Obviously, you mentioned you kind of work on them as people. You help them with kind of the business stuff, but kind of how do you do that really? How do you kind of get into that? Is it just drawing the information out of them, or do you have kind of a set kind of system that people follow or anything like that?
Well, a lot of people call me an engage a coach when they're in crisis. So often they'll think, well, things are going really smooth. I don't need anything right now, kind of thing, which to me is unfortunate. It'd be really nice to be actually start working with people when things are okay, and then now let's just make the future better. But it really doesn't matter to me where we start. Often they'll call me with something has happened, and like for example, this client we were talking about earlier, he had just lost his business partner, and now everything was on his shoulders, and he was kind of freaking out. So he was referred to me, and we. So I go in first of all and help and get ask questions, get some clarity. What's going on right now, what seems most important right now, and so we prioritize, and we'll get the immediate crisis dealt with, and whatever that is. And then once the immediate crisis is dealt with, then mental and emotional space tends to open up, so that then we can get a little more methodical. So then we'll look at, okay, so what are your goals and objectives? You know, what is the future? What do you want 10 years from now? And then I start to reverse engineer the business with my client. What do they want 10 years from now? What do they want 5 years from now? Then what do they want a year from now? So that whatever they're doing right now in the coming year is aligned with the future that they want to create. And then we take that year and we break it, we prioritize what the year needs to look like so that we can work on one quarter at a time. Because I find that a lot of people don't always have clarity about what they want. So, first, we have to create clarity about what. Then we have to create clarity about how and when. Because even if someone has some clarity about what they want, maybe they've written some goals down, they haven't figured out how they're going to work towards those goals. And they definitely haven't figured out when, like to the point where they don't put it in their calendar and know when they're actually going to take the action step. So I break it down with people to that granular level. We look, and I use another tool that comes from a book called The 12-Week Year. They've got a scorecard in that book that they talk about. And we take the goals for the quarter and we break them down on a weekly basis into the action. There's usually only one or two actions that need to happen this week aligned with that goal. And then we pull out the calendar and say, okay, when in this week are you going to do that action? And I'll have them book it for themselves. Okay, Monday morning from 9 to 11, I'm taking that action. It's like, great. Now we know what we're doing. Now we know how we're doing it. Now we know when we're doing it. And when my clients follow that process, then I find they meet or exceed their goals every quarter and just blow them out of the water by the end of the year. So we work on that in addition to what's happening in their leadership, what's the mindset, if they're not doing their action steps, what got in the way, what were the roadblocks, what are the blind spots that they're not seeing, so we can clear those and keep them focused and moving forward. So I hope that
Yeah,
answers your question.
it does indeed. I like that. It's about moving that needle, isn't it? Because, like you say, a lot of us kind of aimlessly, even if we know what we want, we kind of aimless about it. So, we're not driving it forward as such.
Hmm.
Um, and without making them choices and taking the right actions, then we're going to end up kind of just treading water, really, at best.
Well, exactly. And a year goes by, and we're back into resolutions, and that's why resolutions and goal setting doesn't stick, is because we haven't planned it out. So, and again, this is something that I used to wrestle with. I used to avoid plans. It's like, oh, that's too hard, or there was all kinds of resistance I had around it, and when I finally worked through my resistance about it and got on it, it's like, oh my gosh, why did I resist this so long? It's like, this works, just do it.
Yeah, I'm terrible for planning, but I also do accept that it works and that I'll plan a little, but I won't. Like, some people can be really regimented, aren't they? And they'll plan everything. They plan their entire weeks, and I can't operate that way. I don't know why, but my mind just can't cope with it. It's too much stress for me. Because I just find if something slips or something goes wrong, then it just has a knock-on effect to me. So,
Oh, you
um,
might have some perfectionistic tendencies going.
oh no, I don't know about that. I don't know
No.
about that. I think it's the opposite. I think it might be some neurodiversity or something. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, I'm a little bit all over the place with stuff like that. But it definitely does work, and that kind of discipline of making sure things happen actually in the long run is what gives you freedom, right?
Well, absolutely. And I'm not suggesting that something has to be super rigid, because then, like yourself, we'll resist the rigidity. So there has to be a bit of give and take. Find, there definitely the type of approach that I'm suggesting absolutely works. And we have to find a way for it to fit with every individual so that they can adopt it and put it into practice. Otherwise, they're going to resist and it's not going to work for
Yeah, I think the best plan's the one you'll actually do, right? Because if you can have all the
them.
best plans in the world, but if you're not actually going to do it, then it's worthless.
Yeah, exactly.
If people want to find out a little bit more about you, Laura, or get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Ooh, well, I would love that. I love having conversations with people. So, one of the best places to find me is at my website. My website is venturecoaching.ca because I'm in Canada. Lots of information there, lots free downloads. That business planning tool that I was talking about, that's even a free download on my website. So they can get lots of freebies there. I've been on other podcasts like this one. All of my podcasts are on my website as well, so they can listen into and watch other conversations that I've had. So that's a great place to connect with me. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So Venture Coaching or Laura Watson, they can find me there and feel free to reach out because I'm always happy to have a conversation with someone.
Thank you. Before we do kind of bring this to a close, Laura, do you have any kind of final thoughts or messages that you want to leave people with?
Oh my goodness, there's probably so many. Be kind to yourself. Like we talked, at the beginning of our conversation, we talked about how we can beat ourselves up and only focus on what's not working and what's wrong with us. And all that does, because we have this story going or idea that, if we're not critical, then we won't be motivated to improve. And that's not the case. And so I would say be kind to ourselves. Notice what's working, notice the wins, and give yourself permission to feel good about yourself. Create mechanisms where you can have fun doing the things you want to do, because that's going to give you the energy that's going to give us the motivation to take on the challenges. So I guess if that's a parting thought for today is be kind, to ourselves, be gentle, notice what's working, so that we can then, choose the other challenges that we're dealing with and then create a plan for addressing them. Get help as well, so you don't feel like we have to do it alone. Have a colleague, have a mastermind group, hire a coach, get some help and some support so that on the days when you're struggling a little bit, you've got a support network to help you through it.
Laura, that's amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm definitely do advocate that making it a fun element as well. Because, the more you enjoy something, the more you'll do it as well. And life's short, right? So we got to try and make the most of, what we're doing as well. We spend a lot of time in work or business, whatever it is we may be doing. So we want to try and enjoy it the best we can.
Absolutely.
Laura, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it too. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, bye now.